Now, many of you may not know this, but I actually love the first two Cloverfield movies. I think that they're both really solid movies that are really fun to watch. So when the Cloverfield Paradox was announced, obviously I want to see it. It was called the God Particle earlier, then it was called Cloverfield Station. I was excited to see it, and it was supposed to release earlier later this year in 2018. But then it turns out during the Super Bowl, Netflix releases a trailer saying, guess what? Right after the game, you can see the film now on Netflix. I was blown away. I was like, really? Like one of the most anticipated movies of a franchise right now for me is out in 3 hours. Sign me up. I'm watching this right now, tonight. And this film is, well, interesting to say the least. And while I don't do this for most reviews, this review is going to have some spoilers in it. I have warned you immediately. I really can't talk about this film without addressing plot points. So this film is about a group of astronauts who've gone into space on a ship called the Cloverfield. They're trying to find a way to solve the energy crisis that's going on Earth in a way that may stop wars. And so they try to come up with this way to stabilize a beam, this energy beam that they've created, which could be the answer to renewable energy. However, in the beginning of the film, Donald Logue, who plays Harvey Bullock in Gotham, suddenly has the idea of the Cloverfield paradox. And this is a theory that is widely discussed about how if this energy beam, if it all comes together, it's going to result in monsters, it's going to result in a lot of interdimensional chaos, and our world is going to be thrown into a flux. And so this concept is brought up early in the film, and when the experiment is about to be carried out, the ship is suddenly flung into a completely different universe where there's no Earth, they can't seem to find it, and there's somebody else on board who they have no idea who this person is, but this person knows all of them. And so, meanwhile, on Earth, in our dimension, we are to assume, because it's where the first Cloverfield movie is now taking place, one of the people on board, her name is Hamilton, has a husband at home named Michael, and he sees an explosion go off. He goes towards the source of the explosion, and when he gets to that spot, while he's looking at all the wreckage, he sees a shadowy figure go around the smoke, hinting at the fact that yes, that's the Cloverfield monster. So that essentially connects the first movie to this one. How does 10 Cloverfield Lane connect? We'll talk more about that later. So this film is obviously trying to be a connection to a Cloverfield universe. It's kind of like bridging the gaps between the two movies in the ways that they were very different and making a cinematic universe out of it, which is totally fine. I'm excited about that. It sounds like a really great idea. Does it work though? Yes and no. And in a lot of ways, no. But in some ways, yes. Some ways it definitely creates more intrigue regarding this universe because what they've done here in a sense is they've expanded it and they've tried to add in this idea of multi-dimensions, but in the process, which creates a lot of possibilities for making different movies and different storylines regarding Cloverfield. That said, once you've done that, you have to have it make sense and fit in with the realm of the other movies, because now it kind of doesn't. There's a bit of a problem here, which is created by the timeline creation of this film, and a lot of the events that happen over here, they need a lot of explanation to make sense, because this film was intended to answer questions, but it raises a lot of questions in the process. But before we get to that, let's talk about it as a film. How is it as a film? It's fine. There are things in it which are very good. It's a very well directed film, I will say this. It's briskly paced. It's not boring at any point. It's definitely very tense, and there's a lot of great sequences. The production design is really great. In fact, I think Netflix bought this movie from Paramount, and so you can tell that Paramount was already working on it. There's some state-of-the-art special effects in this movie, and they look really great. Now you can look at it and be like, oh, it's a Netflix movie, but yeah, pretty great effects for a Netflix movie. And yeah, that's to be praised. The performances in this movie are also all really, really great. The woman playing Hamilton, her name is Gugu Mbatha Raw, I believe. That's how you pronounce her name. She was really great in this. Daniel Bruhl, David Oyelowo, Chris O'Dowd, they're all good here. And it's a great cast, really. The person who suddenly appears out of nowhere, this woman named Jensen, played by Elizabeth Debicki, was also really great. They were all interesting characters to an extent, and they played the roles the way they were meant to. And so in that sense, the film's fine, and there's a lot of cool elements in there, and the concept is very interesting. The concept of this multiverse, of the Cloverfield series of films, fascinates me. I would like to see where they go with this. That said, the problems lie in the way it's telling the story, because this is where we get into more of the spoilers. Once the paradox is introduced and once they're in this dimension and once they meet Jensen, like I said, knows everybody, and she's like, oh, hey, what's going on? Like, why are you guys here? Like, why are you not on Earth? You know, Hamilton, like, you're supposed to be on Earth. And it's like, no, wait, what do you mean I'm supposed to be on Earth? And it turns out that she's from a completely different dimension. She's actually not from our Earth at all, or from their Earth. How are we gonna go into this? Because if you're creating this possibility that different Cloverfields can exist in different universes, really double down on that stuff, because now there's so many questions hanging in the air. But really the biggest questions of this movie don't have any, well, reason to be there until the very end of the film, which if you've not seen, I'm about to spoil it for you. So here we go. When the film ends, you see the capsule going through the clouds, and as it goes through the clouds, out of nowhere, the Cloverfield monster bursts through the clouds in this extremely awesome and yet confusing way, which I'll say why in a second, and just roars. And it's like the big connection moment of sorts to the two movies. Here's my question. That's not how big it is. How the hell is it that big? Because the Cloverfield monster in the first movie is barely as tall as the Chrysler building, forget the Empire State Building. So how in the hell is this thing as tall as clouds now? How is this like a god level size? This is insane. But that's not even my biggest issue with it. Like, forget that. How is that even there? Like, in the first movie, it's hinted that the satellite which landed in the water, which is kind of recorded in this one little shot of the first Cloverfield movie, is supposed to be the catalyst for the reason of the Cloverfield monsters to exist. Which is where I guess you can use the paradox logic, where it's like, oh, okay, I guess you could use that. But then my question is, if that's the satellite that's landing, the Cloverfield monster comes much later. It doesn't just pop out right there and then. Suddenly in this movie though, the capsule, you don't even see it land in the water, and then suddenly gigantic planet-sized Cloverfield monster is right out of the clouds. Second of all, if that's the same Cloverfield monster, is it, or is it one of the offsprings of the Cloverfield monster, or is that the king daddy of all Cloverfield monsters, and the one we saw in the first film was just a child? Is this a completely different timeline for this particular Cloverfield monster? Is this sometime in the future, or is this sometime in the past? Or is this still in the same dimension as they went into, except that it's in a completely different Earth that they used to know, hence my timeline question. Does that mean that the Earth which they're communicating with isn't the same one? This is something completely different. And the fact that the reality has been altered for good. Are we to completely retcon everything that happened in the first film? Does that mean that in the first movie, whatever we saw in that film, does it mean that now we're supposed to just believe that the Cloverfield monster existed way ahead of time, and the fact that we already had this thing walking around, because that was the catalyst, wasn't it? Isn't that what started it all? But now apparently that thing didn't just pop out of ground. That thing's been walking around for a while. Or is every single thing that I have just said completely useless, and this actually is the final form of the Cloverfield monster? This is how big they actually get. So does that mean that the offsprings, those little things that were coming out of it, when they grow into size, they'll grow into that infant size that we saw in the first Cloverfield film, and then they will all become as fully grown as that? Because now this has implications on 10 Cloverfield Lane. So what reality is 10 Cloverfield Lane in? Is this in the same reality as this movie? Does that mean that when Mary Elizabeth Winstead goes driving towards the area of the mothership at the end of that movie, that means that we're gonna see these monsters again, and as big as this again? My mind is going crazy! So now I'm just asking the questions here. how are you going to connect this to other films? Because even watching it before we got to that very end shot, there were just so many questions that were raised, so many things that were suddenly brought up, certain things that just didn't make any sense regarding how the rest of the Cloverfield universe has worked so far. It's not like it's unwatchable, it's not terrible. It's definitely the weakest of the Cloverfield movies, though it had a great marketing campaign, and the way that this film just sprang out of nowhere to basically be presented to everyone was amazing, and I praise the marketing team for that. But I want the film to also be worth all of that, and if it's not going to be, then people are not going to enjoy it as much. I'm going to give the Cloverfield Paradox a 6 out of 10. This was a pretty disappointing film, but there are things in it that are very good. It is a well-made movie. It is got good elements of filmmaking in it. It does mess up a lot of things, though, in terms of sensibility, and it can definitely be asking a lot of questions after it. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Look forward to my review of Batman Returns very soon. It was supposed to be out yesterday. I got really swamped. I was really busy, but it'll be out very soon. You guys are the best. Please do subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the movies.